Internal Revenue Service IRS Tax News. IRS issues guidance on the elimination of the deduction of qualified transportation fringe benefit expenses. IR 2020-125, June 19th, 2020, Washington. The Internal Revenue Service today issued proposed regulations. There's a link to those proposed regulations here. There'll be a link to this in the description that provide guidance for the deduction of qualified transportation fringe and commuting expenses. So the issue here being the qualified transportation fringe and commuting expenses deductibility. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA, does not allow deductions for qualified transportation fringe, QTF, expenses, and does not allow deductions for certain expenses of transportation and commuting between an employee's residence and place of employment. So that's the original act as it was put into place, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. The law also provided that a tax-exempt organization's unrelated business taxable income is increased by the amount of the QTF expenses that is non-deductible. So the actual income would be increased by the amount of the QTF that was non-deductible. That would typically be a bad thing, generally, because the increased income would then possibly increase the taxes. However, on December 20th, 2019, this was repealed as part of the Further Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2020. So they repealed that component because, again, they're trying to give, benefits at this point in time or tax breaks due to the circumstances. This repeal was retroactive to the original date of the enactment of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. So when they made the repeal at a later date, due to the fact that it being beneficiary, a beneficiary tax repeal, they can put back to the beginning of the time period that the original law was enacted, and that will typically be a benefit. Obviously, if it was a burden, if it was something that would cause problems, it might be less likely that they retroactively put it back in place, right? If it's a tax benefit, something that could be a positive thing to people for the tax period, then maybe they can put it back in, more likely possibly to try to put that back in retroactively. But anyways, that's what they did. Back to the text. This proposed regulation specifically addressed the elimination of the deduction for expenses related to the QTFs provided to an employee of the taxpayer. The proposed regulations also provide guidance and methodologies to determine the amount of QTF parking expenses that is non-deductible. The guidance also includes definitions and special rules to clarify and simplify the calculations underlying the methodologies. For more information about this and other TCJA provisions, visit irs.gov/tax reform. There's a link to this here. There'll be a link to this in the description.